Africa today is the world's poorest and most underdeveloped continent. Its states of debt totaling $200 billion, AIDS and other diseases are ravaging its population, whilst conflict ranging from guerrilla warfare to genocide is frequent. The root of these problems lie in European imperialism and the scramble for Africa. The Romans were the first to come up with the concept of imperialism. Imperialism is essentially the process of maintaining an empire. This empire is ruled by one state that controls the political sovereignty of another political society. Maintaining the empire can be achieved by force, by political collaboration, or by economic, social, or cultural dependence. Africa was heavily impacted upon by European imperialism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Political, cultural, social, and economic systems that had been in operation for hundreds of years were replaced by foreign systems that were not suited to the tribal foundations of many African nations. The economic impacts of imperialism are still being exhibited in Africa today. The plight of contemporary Africa is largely due to the exploitation of the continent. Many of the economic systems set up by imperial powers in African colonies were devised to generate as much wealth possible for the power, without having to benefit the native population. Reinvestment into African colonies was not common, and consequently, when the imperial powers left Africa, infrastructure was not present for the newly independent states to prosper. In addition, the years of exploitation and draining of resources has developed a culture of dependence that is manifested in a reliance on foreign aid. As Sekou Touré stated, colonialism's greatest mistake was to have tried to strip us of our responsibility in conducting our own affairs, thus giving us complexes which led to our lacking in self-confidence. Africa's poor economic situation has been shaped by an unstable political history, a result of imperialism. Since decolonization, African states have been defined by their political instability. Few African states have been able to maintain democratic governance, and many have been hampered by violence and corruption, as well as a succession of coups, leading to the creation of military dictatorships. These problems were created by the poor establishment of political systems in Africa by the imperial powers. Imperial powers often disbanded tribal political systems that had been in place for hundreds of years, and replaced them with European systems. However, these systems often overlooked the African population. Thus, when African powers regained power, the systems were not in place for the African states to operate successfully. The establishment of European political systems also heavily impacted on the culture and social systems of many African nations. The cultural and social foundations of Africa were heavily impacted upon by imperialism. At the Berlin Conference in 1884, the borders of African colonies were established to meet the economic, political, and diplomatic needs of the imperial powers. The creation of these borders tore apart homogeneous groups and brought together rival groups, fueling many of Africa's post-colonization conflicts, such as the Eritrean-Ethiopian War. Imperialism also brought with it Christianity. Whilst parts of Africa had been touched by Christianity long before the European colonizers came, it was only introduced to the majority of the continent by European imperial powers and their missionaries. Christianity was often used to shape people not to resist imperialism. Prior to imperialism, most of Africans adhered to traditional religions or Islam. However, today, estimates say that Christianity is followed by 45% of Africans, roughly 460 million people. Christianity brought with it education, yet it also ended hundreds of years of African traditions and customs. I stand here in Sarajevo, on the site of Archduke Ferdinand's assassination in 1914, the spark that would light a Europe laden with explosives and set off World War I. Here in Serbia, I am at the crossroads of Europe, and the home to the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. To my north is Germany, to the west lies the United Kingdom and France, to the south is Italy, and to the east is Russia and Turkey, the home of what was once the mighty Ottoman Empire. In the years leading to World War I, this continent was fought over by these powers. Europe, however, was not the only battleground. Africa's wealth was also fought over by the imperial powers. Imperialism in Africa was motivated by a need for raw materials such as palm oil, rubber and copper, a desire for wider markets, access to areas of strategic importance such as the Suez Canal, and ultimately aspirations of economic, political and cultural dominance. Interests in Africa were shared by the imperial powers. This led to deep-seated tensions and rivalry between the powers. Alliances and enemies based on ambitions in Africa were forged, and these all contributed to the start of World War I. Here in Morocco, tensions were particularly fierce between Germany and the Entente Cordiale alliance of France and the United Kingdom. Germany, which had far less colonies than France and the United Kingdom, felt threatened by their alliance and also knew it would pose a challenge to Germany's influence in Europe and the world. The Germans wanted to test the strength of the Anglo-Frank alliance, and in 1905, when France obtained free control over Morocco, the German Kaiser went to Morocco to speak in favor of Moroccan independence. This resulted in uproar. A treaty signed in May 1906 settled the crisis by providing France with virtual control over Morocco. In 1911, another crisis occurred. The French brought in extra troops to Morocco to quash civil unrest. However, this was in breach of the 1906 treaty requirements. The Germans, wanting to demonstrate their naval power, sent a warship to Morocco and threatened to attack the French. However, the Germans agreed to not wage military action in return for a slice of France's territory in the Congo. These crises only strengthened the alliance between the French and the British and increased tension with the Germans. The tensions created by imperialism, along with other factors, turned Europe into a tinderbox that only needed a spark to set it on fire.